welcome to the Global Business Insights Podcast, featuring your hosts, Dr. Charlotte Brabant and Max Kent.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, and welcome to our Global Business Insight Podcast. Today, I have the great pleasure to have a very special person on the call. Not only my partner in crime, Max Kent, but we have a phenomenal servant leader, a founder. Once again for being here with us. Maybe just to get the audience educated on your great profile, you could just quickly, briefly introduce yourself to the audience today.
Absolutely. So I've been doing procurement, supply chain for a good 30 years by now. So I was building Maersk procurement back in the days when it was like 2 people and a good idea. And then a few hundred people a couple years later, we built up the regional procurement, a massive learning streak for us, coming from having nothing to having something and then realizing that maybe we needed to maybe granularize it a bit more. So I think we learned a lot in those years. Been on a long path around the globe. I did procurement across Africa. I was living in Madrid after Cape Town. I did all the asset management for Maersk as a group, except for the vessels for a couple of years, living in Holland. Went to Asia, lived out there, built yet another procurement department. So I've been doing these large transformation programs, but always in the anchoring within procurement supply chain for a long time. And part of that journey made us realize that we can only do so much with like brute force efforts, either as a consultant doing the advisory, as you know, or working in-house in the industries. And often what is lacking is the toolbox that helps the employees, either very junior or very senior, to actually perform better at their job without being too cumbersome and too difficult to use. So we tilted as we went along and said, okay, we really want to give a toolbox to people that they can just easily open, get some clear advice, and then, start executing and then close it down again, right? But something that's a lot more normal, like part of your day-to-day interaction, and not something you do like once every quarter when you look at the strategy that you forgot you ever made, right? So it's been a long but exciting journey, and now we're tilting it a bit.
Absolutely. Well, it does sound very exciting. Maybe you can just tell us a little bit more about Costbit's mission, and now you're saying you're tilting it a bit. So how are you trying to revolutionize the procurement space?
Well, we're trying to coin a phrase that is probably not something that we invented, called impact procurement. You can always say that procurement is supposed to have impact in the organizations, but there's been a tendency of procurement to focus on either getting access to goods and services, especially if you are like, high growth, or you are in, in a constrained supply market environment, or you would be focusing on savings, right? There's very few procurement departments I've met that doesn't have saving as somewhere as part of their KPI tree, and end of the year, it tends to be the only one they discuss about, and the other X amount of KPIs they invented, right? So we wanted to say, okay, so we've been living that whole savings or getting access to services and goods, which is less savings driven for, at least 25, 30 years by now. But given that we are also getting older and we have kids and the planet is not doing that fantastic by now, we really feel that we need to get that sustainability part in there, but much, much stronger. And the challenge with sustainability today is that sustainability is often an afterthought, or they do these targets for sustainability, but it ends up being a reporting game. And you can say a lot of things good and bad about the EU and some of the legislation also in the US, but the fact that these big government or pan-government institutions are doing regulations for saying, you have to report on it, suddenly makes it something that people are aware about. We don't like reporting too much, right? We like to do stuff, right? I mean, we come from operations, so we did dispatching, we've done the POs, we've been working at the warehouses, we work with blue collars. So we want to take that notion of saying, okay, I want to get my savings, I want to get access to goods and services, but I do want to maybe not mess up the planet as much as possible in the meantime. So Costbit's mission really is to combine the cost with the sustainability impact. So when you make that strategic decision for your supply base, or that semi-tactical for which contract to use, how to use them, or the actual operational execution on where should I buy from so the contract to live, we want to embed our data fully enriched into those flows, so you can make the real decision to buy hopefully cheaper or better, but also while having a slightly maybe less black or more green footprint. That's really what we're working on, and just that takes a lot of data. It just does. So we started with the analytics space, and we're really moving into how do you manage your spend, but also your impact on the planet.
Okay, this is brilliant, because I think this is one of the reasons I really want to speak to you and have you back on the podcast, because when we spoke before, the first podcast you did was more, I think, a wider conversation about procurement in general and our thoughts on procurement and how digital will help. Obviously looking at your, how you've moved cost bits along, bringing cost back into the conversation. Actually, I've seen loads online over probably the last 10 years. Procurement's not just about cost, it's not just about savings. It's, yes, of course, it's about supply management and these other things as well, but there has to be, like you said, there has to be a saving element. There has to be a cost saving. There has to be, the rest of the business look at that bottom line savings. So now this has come full circle, and you're bringing technology back into that cost saving piece. What are the things that sort of set you apart from other sort of similar solutions and addressing those sort of common pain points? Data just being one of them.
Well, I think there's quite a few things. So if you take it just from the start, if you consider our old core solution is very much still spend analytics, now it's also sustainability analytics. But for most organizations to get onto a platform like this, you're looking at, if you're a small media and you have a D-scope, maybe 3 months of implementation time, and all the hassle and the pain points with legal and with IT, and all the usual stuff, and everybody gets involved and don't have time for it. So it takes time. It's a heavy investment. If you're a larger company, you're easily looking at 6-9 months of implementation time. Right. But given that we made a choice of saying that does not work, because given we come from procurement, I mean, I don't like to buy stuff that I haven't tried first. Let's just be completely honest. I really want to see it, and I want to see it with my data. So we've flipped it entirely. So if you're a small, mid-sized company, we can onboard you in a few days. Right. We just need to know exactly what ERP system you're using, so we can take it in. It also means a lot of our AI engines, a lot of our tech development. I mean, we used to be, I would say, 70-80% front end and maybe the rest back end data. We completely flipped that, because we think anybody can make a nice graph with good data. The challenge is really the data. Right now, we can do different things in our front end because we have our own code, so you can manipulate it completely different. This is not a Power BI or Tableau tool, right? It's a vastly different management process we're looking at, but we need to get the data in order. So a lot of our AI focus is really on how do we get the data out, how do we categorize it, how do we clean the suppliers, how do we clean the items, and how do we do that in a fast way, and how do we come with a really, really qualified guess so that Max, if you're using the tool, you can get onboarded in 1 or 2 days. If you're a small, mid-sized company, you can look at it and you get a feel for it, say, do I like it or not? And if you want to manage your data, you can manage that within the tool without having to say, wow, I don't like it, I'm going to send an email to Charlotte. You now have the unfortunate job of being in master data, right? And then Max will send you an email, and maybe you'll fix it in 3 months, and then Max, maybe she will get it right. We don't think that works. You need to be a lot faster. So you can just, in our tool, just manipulate it, and then instantly everybody can see the change. That's a huge difference. And that's just for the onboarding, of course. And then we have vast enrichment for making sure it's not just cost, but it's also the sustainability piece. So when you can make a choice, you can make the right choice. The right choice has to be cost, but it also really should be the right choice from a sustainability perspective. And I think if people were, from a business perspective, naturally motivated to try to protect the planet, they would have done it. Now, we haven't really been good at doing that, right? So I think we just got to be realistic and honest and saying, if we cannot motivate with money, we cannot motivate for sustainability, right? And it doesn't help if you motivate a company for sustainability and then are buying the wrong and the most expensive products, because then in a couple of years, they'll be dead, and then the polluting guys will be winning the game, right? We need to do both. And that's what we do. And it just takes a massive data engine. And then, if you want to make a fancy graph on top, you can do that. Now, we've done it for you, but, that's really the huge change for us since we spoke last time, which is, I think, a year and a half ago. It's been a dramatic ride for us.
It sounds exciting, though. And I have to say, making the right choice, what you just said, it really resonates with me, because I've also been working this year on a project, making the right sourcing, the right decisions. And yeah, it all comes down to making that right choice. So
It
just
does,
then,
but
yeah.
here's the thing, right? People don't have time for it. mean, they want to do this, but you're
Yes.
super time and resource constrained. So we need to make that easy. Right. So when you have the strategic discussions with your sourcing or category management teams, or the semi-tactical ones with your stakeholders, or the operational one with your dispatch call-off team, you need to be able to just open the tool and see it, and then you can look at it. Right. It doesn't work if you have to go back and say, I think I want to discuss it. Let me get back to you in 2 weeks when I've managed to get the data out and maybe clean it and maybe enrich it, and then hopefully it's still valid for us. No, I want to open it and then just do it within a few seconds.
I love it. And now let's stay on that slogan. You want to see it in a few seconds, but you're dealing with an overwhelm of a data flood. Maybe you can talk and with the right, making that right choice within all that data, maybe you can just discuss a little bit more how AI is then helping you to improve efficiency and accuracy in helping to make that right choice for procurement professionals.
Absolutely. And I think it's, to keep it simple, it's two connected but very different paths. One path is on getting the data ready, which I think is completely ignored by people who just think that this is very easy or who hasn't tried it. But for all of us who's trying to say, okay, we're using this fantastic ERP system, I want to get the data out and get it clean, get it recategorized, take out all the crap that's already in there. That is a huge task, right? We do all that, like that's just part of the product. So yes, you get all the fancy front end, all the really heavy algorithms, right? That's the one we started by building, but we also manage your data for you, right? So that's the first step, because getting access to data typically is where people stop. Or they take that old report that somebody pulled out like 6 months ago, but the world changes. Even in procurement, we may not be the fastest ones to react, but if you go down to the operations, they react day to day. So you need to get live data, or semi-live data at least, and we get live data. So I think you have one path, which is really getting the data right, getting it enriched, just getting all that done without giving you the headache of doing it. That's just there. That's your baseline. Assume the world is clean, which it never used to be. Now we made it clean for you. The second part is all the advanced algorithms we put on looking at it, like where do we see gaps? Like where do we see trends that doesn't fit? Where do we see non-compliance to your contract, non-compliance to your payment terms, etc.? And that is unfortunately all dependent on the data in the system, but you can always see behavioral patterns that we can then flag. And then, Max and Charlotte, you can log into the system and you can look at it and you can discuss it. And you could decide to do something, or you can decide not to do something. But at least I can point you straight into an issue area where normally you would not know it's an issue, because you may not even if you get the data out, you may not have the skill set to analyze the data in a way that guides you correctly. So our job is to guide you, give the transparency, and then guide you to where you should focus. And then the rest is up to you.
Okay, makes absolute sense, and I totally agree with you that bad data in gives you nothing you can report on. There's no point trying to visualize a graph with bad data in it. So I think the cleansing aspect is, you're absolutely right, is where a lot of companies just stop. They don't, or they'll try and implement something and it just doesn't work. In terms of once you've got the data in there, then, so that, assuming that is all correct, what differences has Cosbit got now in terms of the data-driven predictive analytics, those kind of bits where, great, we have got it visualized, we can trust the data. In my experience, when procurement people have that, they then just go to, well, how much have I spent with my suppliers? And, I didn't realize I'd spent that much. The predictive analytics is way more powerful than that. How's it being used? Have you got any examples, or how?
Yeah, so right now we're looking at trend development, and what we're building right now is, and we haven't decided which sources will be the most critical ones. Right now we're building all our predictive analysis based on historical data. And the next step for us is saying, how can we do enrichments? How can we get extra data, for instance? What can we predict on raw material cost developments? That's something that typically has relatively good transparency. Challenges would come to when you look at what is a macroeconomic impact for the war in Ukraine, for instance. You wouldn't know unless you have data that goes beyond the index. So when we implement, we do always take the data out completely and anonymize. So even when I look at the data, I cannot see where it comes from. I can see the cost, I can see the behavioral patterns on how you buy your supply chain, but even inside in our team, we do not have access to see that this is the transaction that Max was doing to Charlotte, for instance. That doesn't work for us, right? That's your data. We don't touch it, right? We clean it, it's yours. So we lift it up, and based on that, and spreading that across multiple different clients. And suddenly we can see, wow, Max, you're starting to buy differently, right? So maybe you already knew that, Ukraine was going to be happening. You're going to see a shift in how you buy. And that's something that we over time want to play back to you, Charlotte, so you can actually act on it. And this goes way beyond just tapping into indexes. Like this is where it gets really interesting, right? And I think we have so much unrest and so many, we've seen this ever since COVID, all these supply chain disruptions, and some people react faster than others. You also see shifts in where you do your manufacturing, and we want to play that back in an easy way, right? So it's more that we do for predictions and playing back. These are really the current events. Like, do you want to react or not react to it? Just working on indexes, but index manipulation, forecasting on cost, that's coming within the next couple of months. We think the other one is even more powerful.
It does sound very exciting. But Thomas, I would like to steer the conversation back to what you mentioned at the beginning: impactful procurement, impactful sourcing, or the magic word, right, making the right choice. How is Cosbits contributing to addressing Scope 3 emissions and promoting sustainable procurement practices?
Yes,
Maybe you can elaborate a little bit more.
Absolutely. So the first thing we do is what has been our core focus right now and probably until the end of the year is to make sure that you can actually see your CO2 equivalent when you look at your cost. Right? They tend to be completely disconnected. So procurement now has, for legal reporting reasons, procurement have now been given the task of make sure we deliver data points for reporting on scope 1, 2, and 3. Right, scope 1 and 2, like very clean. Scope 3 is kind of a mixed bag of everything, so that's somewhat complicated, right? Procurement don't have the bandwidth for it; they don't really like it, so they do it ad hoc once a year, every 6 months, whatever the reporting comes. So we're doing that on the fly. So all our back-end categorization, all our cleaning really feeds into one, presenting your cost picture, but also doing that enrichment. So you could at the same time see all of it, and then you can start to make some of this decision. If you then want to use the CO2 equivalent for your reporting, fine. You can just, extract it, click it, share it. That's freely available for us. But I think that's a key thing. There's a few complexities when it comes to scope 3. There's some of the allocations, the categorization is based on behavioral patterns. So, for instance, we have a very large car dealership, which is one of our clients, and there's a big difference between whether or not they buy a car for own usage, because then the CO2 footprint they have to report is during the lifespan of the car for them, or if they buy a car because they want to sell to UMAX, because then I think they get 15 years of CO2. Right? So there's some of these things you just cannot do easily. So what we've done instead is saying, that is fine. We will also categorize all the things where we don't have doubts, and the rest, you can just do a drag and drop. And then you can do this in a few minutes. And if you do it on the fly, maybe you spend 20 minutes a week on it, and then you're good to go. And it's always updated. And it always, of course, updates also retroactively, right? So if you do it once, it learns from that one. So any interaction you have in the system with our data always goes back into a learning pattern to our AIs. So you don't have to do it again, and then it will extrapolate based on that for the next data set we're going to get in a few seconds. And maybe just a note on that one. So when we got into scope 3, it was actually because we were working with this client and they had to do manual reporting, and they had hired this, very unfortunate, very nice woman to sit and do this full time for 6 months. And we just decided that we think we can do this better. And when we were done, even in the beta version, she could do it in a day, and now we can actually do it for you. You need to make a few decisions, but it's quite fast.
Yeah, I think it's where this gets more complex. You have to provide a little bit of that service to guide the customer along, to make sure they're using the tool. I think in my experience, I've seen people buy carbon management scope 3 tools. They've looked at the report and go, oh, okay, there we are. And then that's the last time they've logged into it, unless they have that sort of account management and development, and to show them the best things to get out of that. So I'm going to kind of ask two sort of questions at the same time here, really. So what have the customers, have you got any success stories, firstly, of how any customers have used these tools and achieved carbon emission savings, any significant savings you can share? And then from that, where do you see the next stage of Cosbits? Are those customer stories the sort of signpost that will take you into the next evolution of Cosbits, do you think?
Sure. Definitely. So from a current success story, we've been very much focusing on cost reductions to start off with, and we still tend to see about 4 to 11%, depending on the maturity, the categories, the size, the local supply market, etc. All those database behavioral patterns of actual cost reductions, where they now can log in and then get guidance saying you should be looking at this category. In this category, by the way, you should be looking at contract compliance or PO compliance or cash flow based on your payment terms and behavioral patterns within payment flows. Um, and that generates savings. So that we definitely had. Now, what we always do when we develop any new feature is that we basically have a lot of these client feedback meetings saying, what are you looking for? We take it all in, and then when people start to repeat the same thing, like they did on the scope 3, how do we do categorization easier instead of wasting somebody's time for 6 months? Then we build it. We always build it with the clients, right? So that's I think that's been a huge thing. There's definitely some things that are from a time waste perspective, I would say, which is not really, that was not our initial focus, was not to also make it easier from like a data management perspective. That's very much something that's grown on us for the last year and a half. So we keep on getting this, it's too difficult to get the data out. So we got the data out. It's too difficult to clean and categorize it. So we did the AI engines for that one. It's too difficult to categorize for scope 3 because there's so many questions. So we built that. So there's a lot of extra things that we honestly did not expect when we started this, but we're now seeing that that's the real power of the tool, is that we can both evolve on the tool, but we can also make sure that a lot of the stuff that is not really generating real impact by procurement, we can either take it away or we can make it so fast and so simple that it's a minor task for somebody in procurement to get this done right. And I think that points into our evolution going forward. There's a whole stream of features coming up in the next 3 to 6 months, and we only do co-development, right? So we look at this price indexing that you referred to before, Max, like how do we do index modulations for predictive price development? That's already in the works with a client. We are considering, should we do bill of material comparison features, because we do a lot of production companies, a lot of retail, right? But especially within production, doing the simple ad hoc comparison between bill of material just makes a lot of sense. So I think that there's a whole bunch of features coming, right? And I think the big power of the new platform we have is that now we have much, much better data, because it's been a huge focus for us for the last year and a half. So now we can actually build this. So some of these ideas are not new, but the data was, pardon my French, so crappy that even if you build it, it would be very hard to use. But now we have much more clean data, so now we can actually use it, right? And that just makes it simpler. So people should stop considering data as a stumbling block, but say, okay, we can actually give it to somebody like Costbits, we can fix it, and you can focus on the outcome instead. Right? So it's been a huge journey. So.
Thomas, it's been very, very inspiring to hear all your future vision and missions, and especially I liked your finishing line, just looking ahead and looking at also following these industry trends. I think one last question. If the listeners would like to get in touch with you, how can they reach you best to answer any other questions?
I think the easiest is either to connect to me directly on LinkedIn. I guess you're going to put my name in there, but it's Thomas Heller-Njor, or if you write me an email, tn@costbits.com, costbits.com. I think that works the best. And then if something I can answer, I'll happily do that. We'd love to speak to clients, potential clients, or just people in the procurement supply chain field. We do a lot of this like free sparring. Or if people have questions that I cannot answer from more technical nature, then I'll send it off to our tech department. I think it's better that I don't try to answer those.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you for your time today. I thought it was very insightful to get your perspective on all these industry trends, and especially the trends for Costbits.
Absolutely. Thanks again, Thomas. It's been wonderful speaking to you once again. And best of luck with your mission.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.